This is a Creative's Year Journal where myself and my cousin explore anything artistic, crafty, or creative that happens to catch our interest and looks like it might be fun. And one of the things we've had a lot of fun doing is sublimation printing, and we did these little bracelets. So we're going to show you more on that towards the end of the video, but we want to start you out with just kind of giving you an idea what sublimation is. So sublimation, by definition, is the transition of a substance directly from the solid state to the gas state without passing through the liquid state. Now, I only show you the definition because I want you to be aware that at some point the ink that we're using for this process does turn into a gas, so please work in a well-ventilated area and or use a respirator mask whenever you're doing sublimation. So let's start by just giving a general overview of the process involved with sublimation and kind of the things that you do. First of all, you start with a source image, and this needs to be a digital image so that you have the option of rotating it or scaling it so that it fits whatever project you have in mind. After you have your source image, then you're going to print it out using a printer with a special ink called sublimation ink on special paper called sublimation paper. With your image printed out, you're then going to attach that image to an object that will accept the transfer of the image. Now, this could be something like a t-shirt made of 70% or more polyester, or it can be a special type of object called a sublimation blank that has a coating on it that will accept the ink. After your object and your image are together, then you take those and you put them in a heat press and you apply a little heat and pressure to it to cause that ink to turn into the gas state and get absorbed by either the coating or the material of whatever object you have. And that is the general process involved with sublimation print. It's not really that difficult, but there are some things to remember whenever you're doing it. Let's go ahead and look a little bit more about sublimation blanks. These little bracelets were a lot of fun to do. The little disc in the middle is an aluminum disc with a coating on it, and we just printed an AI generated image on there and applied that heat, and the finished product is a very cute little bracelet. So here are some sublimation blanks that I had just happened to have on hand to kind of show you the variety that's out there when you're looking for blanks. This is a hand fan that came with a little pocket to put it in, and it's made of a type of a polyester-like material so that it would absorb the ink during the transfer process. And there's the little pocket it goes in. This is a pen. Now the barrel of it is coated in a white coating that will accept the sublimation ink. It is aluminum. And where you do the pen, you basically take the barrel off the pen and sublimate that. This is an aluminum bookmark with one side being coated in, again, that white sublimation coating. This is a little puzzle. Now these look like they're going to be fun to do. I haven't tried them yet, but the front of it is made to accept the sublimation ink, and the rest of the puzzle is basically cardboard. But those are going to be a lot of fun. And those are just some ideas of what's out there. So I'm going to go ahead and show you here in a second the items that I've already done. Here is again that bookmark, and I've put a anime character on one side, and the back of course is blank because the coating is only one-sided on those bookmarks. This is just a magnet. The front had a coating on it, and then the back is the magnet, and I just put a little Pokemon character on there. And then I had these rubber-backed car coasters that have like a fabric face to them that will accept the image. And those are really fun to do. I've done a lot of them. So I'm just going to show you a little bit here by pouring some water on these printed objects, that once they are sublimated, that ink does not come off. So you are safe whenever you're dealing with the sublimation ink. It is permanent. It's not going to bleed or fade off. I wouldn't recommend, of course, putting water on something like the puzzle that's made of cardboard, but in this case we're dealing with aluminum and rubber, so they're going to be fine. The car coasters, if they're down there in that cup holder and get soda or coffee spilt on them, you can just throw them in the wash machine and you're going to be just fine with those. So those are a lot of fun to do. And that's just some of the type of objects that you can do with sublimation and some of the blanks that are out there that you could use. So let's go back to that whole process and look at each part of it in a little more detail and give you some idea of what's involved with these. Now, for a source image, like I said, it needs to be digital. It could be like a photograph you took, or it could be something that you acquired from a site like Pixabay or Pexels, or even like Unsplash. And these sites have images. Some of them are free, some you pay for. You can watch the licensing on there if it's something you want to sell or something. Make sure you have the license to do that. But you can also get graphics as well as images. So you have some options there. If you are an artist, you might want to draw your own art with something like Clip Studio Paint. Now, but it is a drawing program where you can draw on like a tablet. But there are plenty other art programs out there, including Photoshop, Illustrator, which are Adobe products, Inkscape, Blender. There are a ton of them. Now, when it comes to a printer, you are going to need some sort of a printer when doing sublimation because you have to get that image onto paper somehow. Now, the paper I use is the A-Sub paper, and with most of these papers, there's going to be something on the back so that you can identify the back from the front of the paper, because one side is coated to absorb more of that sublimation ink and hold it really well. And once you have that paper, you're going to load it in a printer. This is a Sawgrass printer. It is one of the higher end printers. It does some extra maintenance stuff to keep it in good working order. But with a Sawgrass printer, of course, you would be using Sawgrass ink cartridges in it. Then here is a Brother printer. They're relatively new to the market. But of course, with a Brother sublimation printer, and this is a sublimation printer, you would use Brother ink. Here is an Epson sublimation printer, and with that you would of course use the Epson sublimation ink. But if you can't afford the $400+ like I couldn't, I found this Epson EcoTank, just a regular inkjet tank printer, and I was able to convert that to use sublimation ink. I know that it's not going to last as long as one of the actual sublimation printers, but I didn't want to invest $400 in something I might not like, so I could simply put this Hippo ink into the tank. It voids the warranty, and the printer will probably only last a couple of years at most, but it was good for an entry level. Now, there's a lot of other inks out there. A-Sub makes sublimation ink. Cosmo makes sublimation ink. You can just look around online for who makes sublimation ink. I actually managed to get this Epson EcoTank on sale in kind of a trade-in deal for only like $90. So that's where I went. Now, once your image, of course, is attached, you're going to want to put it on your object. And to do that, you're usually just using a heat-resistant tape to tape it into place. And I use the blue tape because I've been told that the yellow can sometimes leave some residue. So I'm just going to stick with the blue tape. In some cases, you might have to use like a shrink wrap on some objects, but usually it's just the tape. Now, as far as the heat press goes, you're going to be wanting to apply heat that is somewhere between 250 degrees Fahrenheit up to like 425 degrees Fahrenheit, depending on what you're sublimating. So your household iron is not going to work. You're going to need some sort of heat press. I use this little mini press, and it's only like a 10 by 10 size, but it's plenty big for what I'm doing. And there's lots of different models available, and you can go higher end with things that are automatic, but this one works for me. And you can find even smaller ones or custom ones for doing like hats and things like that. So now we did do these bracelets, like I said, and we're going to show you more about that. But I want to show you some of what we did here whenever we were sublimating. Now, we were going to do these little wind spinners, and they are coated on both sides, so I'm going to take that out of the package there. But on the table, you can see a few things as we're starting our sublimation journey here. I have the bracelets right here, and you can see the little white disc that we're going to actually be putting the image on. And here are some of those images we put on the bracelets, printed out. They're really small. They were cute, so we just made those using an AI generator. And with most of these blanks, they come with a protective plastic film on them that you have to peel off. So I'm doing that to these little wind spinners that we bought to sublimate. So these were fun to do. That's kind of hard to get the coating off sometimes. It's hard to get it started. And I found that taking it off these spinners was even harder because of the holes between the different areas of the spinner. You have those gaps, and it made it more difficult. But we've already printed out images we're going to put on these, and they're right there at the sides. There we go. That's all off. Now to do this, we're just going to basically lay our blank over the image and trim the image down to the correct size. We actually designed these images to be circles, and we'll be putting the same image on both sides. Here's one we've already taped together with the image on there. And once you get your image actually onto your blanks with some tape all trimmed down, these were ones for the bracelets, you're just going to put them on a heat press pad between a couple layers of butcher paper, and then you're going to apply heat with your heat press. Now, our heat press is set to around 380 degrees, and that should be perfectly fine for these aluminum. Now, the bracelets are an aluminum disc, and the wind spinners are also made of aluminum. So we can use basically the same temperature for both. So we're just going to, whoops, got a little tangled there. Our heat press has heated up. Now we're just going to place it onto our objects there. Press down a little bit and start the timer. And the time for these were only about 40 seconds. So we're just applying a little bit of pressure just to make sure everything is well sandwiched in there. My cousin likes to give it a little rub there, but a little static. Maybe she shouldn't have done this time around, because there's no weight to these little bracelet things. They moved around, but they're going to be fine because the image is already sublimated on there. They were very hot though, so we just used a small set of tweezers to move them off our heating pad. Now our heat press is already pretty much to the right temperature, so we're just going to go ahead and lay these wind spinners on here to get their first press as well. Now we should have already gone ahead and changed out this butcher paper, the bottom layer, because the back side of these wind spinners do have that coating on them as well. And when we reheat the paper, we're going to get a little ghosting on there, which I'll show you later. It's not a big deal in this case because our images are darker, what we're putting on there. But if it was a lighter image, it could really be a problem. So here we are, just going to go ahead and repeat the process with placing our heat press on there and starting the timer again. And here we go. You can see how the ink turned into that gas and kind of blew out around the actual object that we were pressing. You can see on our pad we've forgotten to put butcher paper down a couple times. And here is one of those little bracelet discs. It's really small. So I'm just going to go ahead and start taking the paper off here. These have been allowed to cool for a while, so they're no longer hot to the touch. I can just start taking off this tape. And here we go. Just a little dragonfly put on this little bracelet. So there's a dragonfly and a little bird that we did. These, again, were just AI generated images because they're just little cute little bracelets. And here are what some of the other images that we picked are like. We have some bunnies and some cats and a capybara and some flowers. And I think they're really pretty and cute. So here we move on to those wind spinners, and we've so far just printed on one side of them. That's what they look like on the one side. And you'll see the other side is still blank. And as I mentioned, there is some ghosting from that ink that was on the butcher paper that is on that coating on the back side, but the images are dark enough they're going to cover that up, so it's not a big concern in this particular case. So I'm just going to go ahead and now line my back side up with a duplicate copy of that same image and do a quick trim and attach it to this wind spinner again. And I'm just using the heat resistant tape here, or rather my cousin is in this case. You want to put enough tape on there to make sure that your image is not going to move around, and make sure it's not buckled or anything like that. So here it is all done. And I have one that we've already printed on and kind of folded out. This was the rose one that we did. And you can see they're just made to spin. So those are really pretty. I like those. Now we have to finish up these bracelets by actually adhering that little disc into the bracelet. And to do that, it came with this double-sided adhesive disc. So it's really tiny here. So I'm using some small tweezers to pull off the backing and place it into the center of that bracelet. Once that's placed in there really well, I'm going to give that a good rub. I have to get the other side of the backing off because it was a double-sided adhesive. There we go. And just to show you that it is sticky there. Now we can take one of our little discs and go ahead and place that right into the bracelet. Just make sure it's oriented correctly. And give that a firm twist and press. Nice firm press so that it's in there nice and sound. Now the final step is to use some UV adhesive or UV resin adhesive to actually put on that dome on it. And I'm going to use just a little bit of it and this bread tie, and I'm working with a magnifying lamp here to just put this around the very edge of the bracelet, because I don't want to get too much over the actual image. I just want to adhere the dome on the sides. So it's going to take a few minutes to get this done. A little bit of patience. Of course, working with resin, I do have those gloves on. And here we set the dome on top and hit it with some UV light, because this is a UV resin. And there, after a few minutes, it's firmly in place. Now I will throw this in an actual UV cabinet to give it some more time under the light to make sure that that is fully cured. So this has been a lot of fun. I hope if you get into sublimation printing, you have fun. Here is a list of some of the supplies and equipment that we used. You'll find some links actually in the description for this video. And I hope this was somewhat helpful and gave you an idea of a craft you might want to try. It does require a little bit of equipment, but none of it is too awfully expensive, especially if you go with a non-standard printer like I did with the Epson EcoTank. I hope you'll come back again to join us for another video.